Welcome to another edition of Resounded Glory. I'm Bob McElligott, and today you can tell when we're getting big time because that's when we expand it. We get into co-hosting, and that's where we're at today. A little bit later, Major Lowe is going to join me, and we're going to talk about golf. But first, we'll start with football. Joe Caputo is my co-host here today. So, Joe, welcome to the show. Good to have you alongside of Marquette Dixon, who's a running back and a linebacker for the football program. Marquette, you're coming off a tough loss last week. You're playing against a rival in DeSales. A game that you guys, it was kind of a seesaw battle in that game. You wind up losing it 31-24. How disappointing was it when that clock wound down in the fourth quarter to be on the short end of the stick in that one?
Well, I mean, I was pretty upset when I figured out how we were going to lose, but I didn't want to give up. I thought that we had a extra step or a chance to push through, because when it came to third and fourth quarter, we were pushing through, doing our thing, and pushing the ball down the field. But I mean, ultimately, we end up coming out with the loss. But I think this has motivated us to push on and keep going throughout the year to go back to states.
You had a good game last week, and you guys were running the ball very effectively. When you're taking that ball behind the line of scrimmage, what are you looking for, and how good of a job did your offensive linemen do to open you holes last week?
Well, I'm thinking first, get upfield, get as many yards as possible. But I know that my linemen can push through, and they'll get to the piles, and they'll make sure they get somebody. They won't miss anybody. So I know that I got to get upfield and get to the touchdown as fast as possible.
All right, so next week you have 4-0 Worthington Kilbourne. How do you think that your team will go, considering you're 2-2?
I think our team will do pretty well because I know all of our players are well equipped and they've practiced really hard with Birchfield being on our back. That will do really, really good.
You haven't faced them before. This is something a little bit new for you. They're coming off a huge win last week. They put up 40-plus points. What do you have to execute well, and I mean consistently well, throughout the game to get the win this week?
We take away the run game, stop the running back, and make sure we get to the pile on the tackles.
Noah Key is a guy that's very well known here because he had a season where he had 2,800 rushing yards in a season. You're sitting at about the 600 mark right now. That's a big goal for you, isn't it, to try to challenge or reach and break that record, especially for a guy that last year had an injury and missed a significant amount of time?
I really want to break it. It's been a key goal ever since I started coming to Hartley. I've always wanted to. And I just want to be I want to go down in the record books as one of the best Hartley players to come through Hartley.
And when you look at that, and it's great to have those goals, and you want to reach that, but on the same token, you have your individual goals, and then you've got your team goals. And how tough is it, or is it tough whatsoever, to make sure that those two things mesh?
I don't think it's hard to, because I know what my boys and me can do. So I'm just playing hard consistently, and if I know I play hard, I know they'll play hard for me. Marquette,
thank you very much. It's great to have you with us today, and best of luck to you against Kilbourne this week.
Thank you.
All right, now it's time to talk a little bit of golf, and I've got a new co-host for this segment. Major Lowe is down here on the other end, and we're joined by David Leskoviak, who is the golf coach here at Bishop Hartley, and Bryce Twenty, who's on the golf team. And let me start with you guys. You've got a big tournament coming up this weekend, CCL tournament, and then you've got playoffs getting ready to start next week. It is that time of the year. And Bryce, as you get into these clutch matches and these clutch situations, is there any more pressure in your mind, or is it the same pressure that's there day in and day out?
Well, there's a little more pressure because obviously with sectionals, it's do or die. So there's a little more pressure to it, but it's still the same game. It's still going out and playing a golf course. And you still just got to do your own thing, and you can't let the pressure mess with your routine and just get you off your game. So you just got to, I guess it's more of you got to focus more.
Coach, when you look at your team going into these very important matches, how strong is this team?
It's an extremely strong team. We, just to give you a little background, we last year in districts, only one team from our central district made it to state. And that was Bexley, who shot .309. We shot .310 to finish one stroke behind them, and Bexley went on to win the state by 10 strokes. So I think there's a chance we had the second or third best, at worst, team in the state last year. We just didn't get a chance to prove it. So this year we were on a mission. We have all but one guy back, and these guys have really stepped up and proven that we're right in the conversation again as far as the handful of teams in our central district that have a chance to get to state. And it's all about, first of all, advancing past sectionals and then showing up to districts and playing our game. And I think if we play average, we have a decent shot to get out and make the state tournament, which is our goal this year.
As you guys get deeper into the season, what are you guys doing differently during practices, and is there any more focus from the guys?
Oh, I see some more focus. And as far as what I'm doing differently, I'm lucky to have a couple seniors like Bryce and Jared Ozarzak. We have a sophomore, Trent Tipton, who's the number one player in the state in the sophomore class. Those guys, they're on their own. I can trust them to go work on their game, take the strokes off they need to, have an efficient practice. And as a coach, that's a real blessing. So what I've been doing differently is I've been working more with the last couple scores on our team. Mm-hmm. And that's where I feel like I can take the most strokes off right now. So I've really started to hone in on a couple individuals, work on some very specific putting drills and things like that I think are going to help them. We've had the whole year to check out what some of the younger kids, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And so, yeah, I'm definitely targeting those weaknesses because if we get a couple more strokes off of our last couple scores, hey, that's only going to be better for the team.
Bryce, the same question for you. From a player standpoint, anything you're targeting?
Well, I'm doing a similar thing because I just kind of break it up. And he told us, he's like, because he doesn't want us just focusing on like hitting irons and drivers all day. So he told us to like kind of break it up. And so we do usually 45 minutes of chipping and or putting, and then 45 minutes of irons and like just hitting at the range. And the way I break it up is if I notice that my putting's been off, I'll putt more than I chip. Or if my chipping has been bad recently, then I'll chip more than I putt. But we still break it up so it's like half and half, so you're getting the full game practicing.
Coach, I got to ask you, this is different from other sports. We were just talking football here a couple of minutes ago, and you're coaching individuals in that game, but you're also coaching the collective group. You're coaching Bryce one way, another guy another way. What kind of a challenge is that for you to figure out the nuances of every single player you have?
It's a big challenge, and this is my third year of coaching at Hartley, and it's probably taken me all 3 years to develop my philosophy on that. And what I think is that, yes, you have to look at each player individually, and each player is responsible to be self-aware, address their own weaknesses, to communicate that with me. I also get a ton of information from their dads as they're following them around on the golf course. I spend a lot of time talking to the golf dads, and they've played way more golf with their son than I'll ever see. And there are some themes, mental game, short game, and so you can never go wrong working on that. I'm also the school psychologist here at Bishop Hartley, and so I stay away from tinkering with their swings. I'm not a professional. I'm not trained to do that. But I do have some training to get up in their head and try to figure that out and try to make, golf is, once you have a certain level of skill, it's all mental. And so we're working on, the controllables, what we can control, putting adversity behind us, bouncing back, staying calm after a bad shot, choosing an appropriate response after a bad event. So, there's some overlap, but yeah, you got to take it golfer by golfer. There's a big disparity in the way they play the game and what they've practiced on so far and their weaknesses. And it takes a lot of individual instruction, but the theme is, you're not just working on your game for yourself, you're doing it for the good of the team. And I think that's we sat down halfway through the year and we all kind of got back on the same page and realized we want the same thing. We want to play for each other. There's a lot at stake here. And, for Bryce to contribute to the team, the only way for him to do that is to work on his game and then to help other people out too along the way. So that's a great question. And, I hope that after 3 years, I'm kind of figuring out the best way to do it.
That's great hiring, by the way, to put a psychologist type guy in charge of the golf team. I wish I would have had a guy riding in the cart with me like that. You'd help out my game a ton, believe me. No, you probably wouldn't help my game. There's not much help for it. Bryce, I got to ask you, you and I were talking before you started this. You used to be, I know that you played baseball before. I've seen you play baseball before. What is the difference in going from that kind of a team atmosphere where you're part of a team where you're actually on a field with a lot of other guys at one time, and going into this, whereas your coach just said, you're part of a team, but it's really all you. You're on an island, and you've got to perform kind of by yourself, all for the good of the team. What's the difference in there for you?
Probably the main difference is how you contribute to the team. Like when I played baseball, I was usually first baseman, and for us to have like to get an out on like an infield ground ball, I rely on like the guy who catches it to make a good throw so I can catch it. But now it's kind of the only thing I can control on the golf course is how I play, because like I can't hit a tee shot or a putt for one of my teammates. So it's basically the way you contribute is how you play, and it's not how, like in baseball, the way you play, like the way you throw the ball or the way you hit the ball, that affects the team. Like, I guess there's more people involved in one play, but for me, like one play in golf is one shot, and you're the only person involved in that shot.
And that one play could make a huge difference. By the way, Coach, that's why I'm good in scrambles, because other people can pick me up. That's because I'll let them down all the time.
And one last thing I want to say about these golfers is that, we might get the reputation of being, and I've heard kids call us an easy sport. And sure, we're not out there taking hits like football or in basketball sometimes, but when Bryce is out there on hole 16 all by himself and hits a bad shot, if I'm not around, he has no one there to pick himself up. He's got to do it himself. And so that's why, I absolutely demand mental toughness from these guys. We play on the toughest golf courses against the toughest opponents we can all year. And that's why Bryce is doing his job right now, and we're ready to go next week.
You ever throw a club?
Yeah.
That's all. We don't have to go any further. We've all been there at some point in our lives.
Coach, one more question for you. How great is it to have those players that have that integrity and that can self-evaluate themselves?
It's vital. It makes my job multiple times easier. You talk about integrity. There might be some other golf teams out there that their reputations might be less than good. If you have a problem kid on your team, if you have a kid accused of cheating, which unfortunately happens every once in a while, that affects your whole program. We've never had that happen. We will never have that happen. And I've had a couple spectators come up to me after the round and say, "Hey, I saw your kid call a penalty on himself. Golf's unique in that way. Called a penalty on himself that no one would have ever seen." And the player says, "Hey, I did this. That's a one-stroke penalty, a two-stroke penalty," adds it onto a scorecard. And so I don't care about the final score in that case. I couldn't be more proud of our guys and the integrity they have.
Major, come on, be honest. Doesn't this make you want to go grab the clubs and play around?
It really does.
Yeah, see that? You guys have done a great job here today. Thank you very much, Coach David Leskoviak of the golf team and Bryce 20. Good luck this weekend, guys, in the CCL and also as you move into sectionals. Well, that is going to do it for this week's edition of Resounded Glory. From Major Low, I'm Bob McElligott.